Sambuddhasa. Honor to the Sublime One, the Worthy One, the Fully Enlightened One. So, I had a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a little bit. Those of you who have heard me talk a bunch of times, you've heard me talk about being able to let go to certain things in your daily life and society, and people have kind of brought up the issue of letting things go, or feeling like there's something that you can do about it but letting it go, these kind of things. And I came up with a simile that I think is a pretty good simile for these kind of situations. And I'm gonna add in a couple other stories and different things, but basically the topic that I wanted to talk about today is being able to let go of things in the world. And these are things that somebody who might be an idealist like I was might identify with this. Somebody who might want to be out there protesting and trying to change the world and make the world a better place. These kind of things. So this is going to be my talk on that. Yes. So the simile that I've come up with, actually it's a silly simile, but it's the simile of the leaky faucet. And the reason why it's the simile of the leaky faucet is because this leaky faucet taught me this. Or at least maybe taught me a better way of trying to explain what it is about letting go and also doing what you can, but knowing when you can't change the world. And I wanted to preface this talk by a prayer. Yeah, it's going to be the first time I've ever said a prayer in one of my talks. But growing up Catholic, and somebody who felt like he was not really, and it didn't fit him, right? I always felt like, and now that I always had this Buddhist worldview, but this one prayer always made sense to me. And I think this is a good thing to put in here. And those of you who might have been raised Catholic or Christian, you might know it. It's called the Serenity Prayer. And that prayer goes, grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think about that. That always connected with me. That always made a lot of sense. Now, of course, in this prayer, you're asking God to grant you these things. Where in Buddhism, what we're trying to do is, when we practice, we're trying to see things as they truly are, which is wisdom, right? We're not asking an outside entity to give us this wisdom. What we're trying to do is develop this wisdom so we know for ourselves what we can change and what we can't change. And to also know, to see what our attachments are to these things. We might attach to something, and we might try to fool ourselves that this situation can change, or I can make a difference, and we might not be able to. And sometimes you might actually be able to make a difference. The wisdom helps us to understand and helps us to know when enough is enough. So get to the leaky faucet. So basically, at work, in the little lunchroom area, there's a faucet. One day, I noticed it was just, leaking. Little stream was coming out. So I was like, somebody must have been careless. They didn't push it down all the way. So I went and I pushed it down all the way. But it already was. was like, whoa, it's down all the way, but it's leaking. What's going on with that? So I moved it up just a little bit, and it stopped. I was like, so that's a trick. People never took the time to notice this, so that's why it was leaking. So I made it stop. And as time went by, days and days and a week or two, every time I'd go in, it would be leaking. And, okay, I would fix it. I would push it up a little bit. So it got to the point where I thought to myself, well, obviously nobody's notices what's going on here. It's not being fixed. So this is where I decided to put it upon myself to say, okay, you know what? There's something I can do about this. I can alert the guy who's runs the building, right? And so I went to him. I said, there's a leaky faucet. I said, it's not, people think that don't notice that it's leaking because they push it all the way down and they leave. And he's like, oh yeah, I know about the faucet. We're going to get that fixed. And that was about a month and a half ago. When I walk into the the lunchroom today, what do you think I saw? A leaky faucet. Now I've never, somebody mentioned before with the hippies, I never really considered myself a hippie. I'm not really a huge environmentalist per se, but I like to do my part when I can. So, and plus I thought, you know what, this company who owns this building is losing out on money for water costs, because water bills can be expensive, especially in a big building. So I figured, it's a win-win. You don't waste water, you help out a company, and there you go. So, to this day, the issue is still there. The faucet still leaks. Now, I could, if I had a lot of determination or a lot of stupidity, I don't know which one, I could, every time I see it, I could fix it. But I know that when I fix it, the next person comes along and it goes back to the way it was. And I know, short of me actually knowing what I was doing, I could get a wrench and I could maybe sit there and fiddle and try to fix it myself. But I don't have the time for that. So this is what the faucet kind of helps me learn, is that there are things in life you can change, but there are a lot of things in life you can't change. And when we try to change these things in life that cannot change, whether it's a social situation, political situation, our partner, all of these things, when we try to force change in these things, what happens? Maybe sometimes they'll change a little bit and it'll go back to the way it was, or it'll change in a different way. We know as you practice, you come to see that everything is always changing. So really, when we think about things not changing, they are changing, but they're not always changing in a direction that you want them to change in. And exactly, evil, this gets us upset, right? And why it gets us upset is because we don't truly understand the reality of how things are. The Buddha said that ignorance in Buddhism is not knowing the Four Noble Truths. That is, life contains unsatisfactoriness or suffering, also known as dukkha. The cause of that is our craving. There is a release from that called nibbana or nirvana. And that the path to the cessation of this dukkha is the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's the Four Noble Truths, right? And so ignorance is not understanding these Four Noble Truths. So ignorance is bliss. Yeah. It's like the old Matrix thing, the red pill or the blue pill. Which one would you want to take? For me, even, I don't know. I never even, it was never a thought in my mind. I'd always take the red pill. Always. So I don't like ignorance. But even that can be an attachment, right? You can have an attachment and aversion to your own ignorance. Yes. So I'll give you a little bit of background of myself, a little bit of experience from me. I am, or I should say I was, although technically I still am, I haven't given it all up yet. I'm a libertarian. And libertarian is somebody who believes in freedom both socially and economically. And this is something that many people, if they really knew, they know that this is what they would be. But we have these sides, right? This left and right, this Democrat and Republican. And so as somebody who was always an independent person in terms of politics, I never liked either side. I always had strong feelings about this. And so when I got into politics and I became like a leader in the party and all this kind of stuff, I was out there debating and trying to educate people and all of these things. And because I was an idealist, right? I was always a huge idealist. I had very, very strong feelings with regards to justice, with regards to truth. These things, like people should be free, this, that, yada yada yada. So I'd be out there. We'd hand out pamphlets telling people what their freedoms are, like in inner cities, and like how when they were getting, laws were getting put against these people that were ridiculous laws, these kind of things. So I'd be out there, and the more I practice, the more I realized that this is the world. Even great people that come around every once in a while, like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King, even these great people, they were able to enact some change. They were able to lead people towards some great change. But they didn't change the world. So when you look at even these great people, what can they do? They did a lot of change. They did a lot of good. But there is a limit to that. And I think that's what we need to know. We need to know our limits of what we can do. When we get into a relationship with somebody, and you hear this a lot with women, like women have to train their man. They have to train him. Or, they say somebody has to, I like my person, but they need to do this or to do that. And what happens when you try to do that? When you try to change somebody and they're not ready for it, or they don't want to change, what happens? It's like butting heads, right? You know that I am, those of you who hear me talk, you know me a while, I'm a Child Protective Services, so I deal with people who have lots of issues. They have mental health issues, they have a lot of drug issues, and you cannot change them. You can help, but they have to make the change themselves. And this is what the Buddha says too about the practice. He says, I can't bring you to the far shore. I can help you. I can point the way. And dude, I see what you said, and I agree. See, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to use this the spout simile, because this is something that when I give a talk like this, people bring up all the time. It's not, what I'm trying to say is not that you shouldn't do anything, or that you should just say, well, I can't change anything, I might as well just sit around and let the world go to hell or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. That's definitely not what the Buddha said either. But what we do need to know is the limit of what we can change and what we can do, and allow ourselves that when we reach that limit, that we can say, okay, I've done what I can. That's the difference. So when we talk about letting go, even in many Buddhist monks today, like Bhikkhu Bodhi created the Buddhist Global Relief, right, to help teach people around the world different ways of farming and stuff like this. There's definitely things that we can do and that we should do to help others. Well, I don't know. I'm certainly I am certainly no enlightened being to tell you that to deny you, but yes, limitation is a mental construct. That's true. That's true. However, we can free our minds so they act without limitations. Agreed. But while our minds are not quite free, we don't want to we don't want to go past our limits. The ones that we have, the ones that we make for ourselves. Talking realistically in day-to-day life. Because when we do, we drain ourselves. Of course it is. Just like you quoted from the Dhammapada, mind is the forerunner of all things. We know this. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up was the starfish poem in this. When we got to this section of talking about that, of course, we should be doing things. Some of you know the starfish poem, right? You've heard me say it enough. The starfish poem is the story of the old wise man going down the beach, seeing thousands of starfish, and seeing one kid throwing starfish back into the water. And the old man says, silly kid, you can't save all these starfish. What are you wasting your time for? And the kid, was throwing a starfish in, and he goes, oh, I saved that one, right? So I think that's also a perfect story of what I'm trying to get across, which I might not be doing the best of. But so even though the kid with the starfish was, he knew that he couldn't save all those starfish, but he was still doing what he could within his own limitations. And he had no unrealistic feelings or beliefs that he could save all of those starfishes. Yes. Ah, yes, those people with the bodhisattva vows, they got their work cut out for them. Let me they got a long way to go. That's for sure. A very long way to go. So that's I guess just about, it's about 6:30ish. So if you want, we can continue talking about this topic if anybody has any further questions or comments. Dude, thank you very much for turning this into a discussion. I appreciate that, because a lot of times it's better for us to discuss rather than hearing me yap on for 45 minutes. Ignorance of non-self. You know, if I was a bit more advanced, I might be able to put in the anatta concept into the Four Noble Truths. But I'm not sure I could do that in a in a good way. But all of the teachings of the Buddha fit within the Four Noble Truths. They call it the elephant's footprint, right? Just like all the footprints of all the creatures on planet Earth can fit within the elephant's footprint, so too do all of the teachings of the Buddha fit within the Four Noble Truths. So if I were to hazard a response to that, which again, I don't know if I would take it as 100%, but if I were to hazard a response to that, I would say the anatta comes from the second noble truth, right? Second noble truth is that this craving, this clinging, is the cause of dukkha. And what are we clinging to? What are we craving to? This desire is another word for it. We are craving contact. We are craving and attaching to our sense organs and the consciousness of those sense organs having contact with things out in the world. So now we're going into, actually we're connecting in dependent origination into that. Because again, dependent origination is part of that threefold teaching. Four Noble Truths, Noble Eightfold Path, dependent origination. Every tradition of Buddhism has those three in one form or another. Oh, what tradition were you a monastic in, dude? Oh, really? Welcome. That's very cool. It's rare that we get to meet a former monastic or a monastic here at the Buddha Center. So, oh, so how long were you a monastic, a bhikkhu? A year. Now, is that something that you wanted to try out for a year or two? I know over there they do that where you can go and do it for a year. Is that something that you were looking into? Well, I thank you for your input to this. That's you have a lot of good experience. I see that you can input into this talk. And also, if you ever want to do something at the Buddha Center, I highly suggest talking to Delani if it's something that you'd like to do. I'd also like to talk to you personally because becoming a monastic is something that I'm moving toward. So I'd like to hear about your experience. But we can talk about that another time. That's certainly one way of putting it, yeah. That's definitely one way of putting it. That's all we can do, is continue to practice, whether we have a robe or not. So any other questions, comments? You can go back to what Marine was talking about, asking about ignorance. But the Buddha himself, when he talks about, and I can find the link on Access to Insight, but ignorance, or avidya, when he says not knowing these Four Noble Truths, this is ignorance. Anatta is a whole topic for another talk, and that's not really a topic that I don't think I've done a full talk on anatta yet, because I don't know if I feel like I have enough true experience and wisdom with anatta to say much other than what has been taught. So you need like a little Buddhist cheat sheet, right? I've seen that if you go to like a teacher store or a college store, they have like a little laminated thing, and it's like personal finance or science or math or whatever. That's what you need, one of those little laminated cheat sheets that has the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the dependent origination, the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. Then you have the always willing to take a website. And then of course you have the all things, all conditioned phenomena have these 3 impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self, the 3 characteristics of existence. Then you have the 7 factors of enlightenment. There's many different numbered that, but back in the Buddhist time, there was just oral tradition, right? And part of the ways that they learned and practiced and moved on, carried on from person to person, oral tradition, was repetition and these numbers. That's how the mind remembers things easier. So you have the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha. It's all numbers. That's where you see all of these things. Oh, what's the website, dude? Did I miss it? I'm anxious to see if it's a a new Buddhist website that I haven't seen yet. And it is. Interesting. Good. Yes, I did, Clark. It's a worthy organization to help out, for sure. You can always feel free to to push that website. It's definitely something, and anything to help out monastics of any gender is good for me. Okay, so unless we have any final comments or questions, I think this is pretty much at an end tonight. Thank you all for coming and sharing in Dhamma and discussing, which is important. I always appreciate that. So unless I come up with another topic for next week, it might just be another question and answer. We'll see what happens. A week is a long time, and all things are uncertain, right? We could be dead by next week, who knows? All things are uncertain. So, if we all live next week at the same time, and I'm not doing something crazy at work that's going to keep me out all night, then we will meet again. Seven whole days, exactly.